Welcome to the Mindful Millennial Podcast, where host Seth Marcus dissects and discusses all things impacting the millennial mind. Mentors, peers, and professionals share intimate conversations on subjects such as entrepreneurship, exercise and health, the blessings and curses of technology, travel, and how to navigate adulthood in this age of information. We're the largest generation in history, and we dictate the future. The Mindful Millennial finds the signal through the noise.
What's up, Mind Millers? Welcome back to the Mindmill Podcast. Not too much of an update in my world today. I'm just so content to be back in my home in Denver, digging into my work and routines. The fall is here, and I'm currently recording this introduction in my sweatpants and slippers, and I'm loving every frickin' minute of it. I wanted to take a second and thank all of you for listening and supporting the show. If you'd like to continue helping the show, just leave a review on Apple Podcasts or whichever player you use. Also, be sure to sign up for the Mindmill mailer to stay up to date on all that's going on. This episode is a special one. A while back, I interviewed my good friend Greg Woodruff, jiu-jitsu competitor, yoga teacher, Yellowstone ranger, and all around one of my favorite people. When we last spoke, Greg was moving across the country from Alabama back to Yellowstone for another season working in the park. We were both in big chapter changes in our lives and had tons to discuss. Greg is one of those friends that no matter how long it's been since seeing each other, we pick it up right where we left off. I loved that episode and highly recommend giving it a listen to before, or maybe after, listening to today's show. When we recorded the first episode, Greg invited me to come and visit him in Yellowstone sometime after I returned from Europe. Fast forward a year, and I find myself in Bozeman, Montana, getting picked up from the airport for a week-long expedition through America's most iconic park. 4 days backcountry, hundreds of wildlife sightings, 0 bears, thank God, dozens of hooked fish, and countless thermal features later. And I can assuredly say that this is one of the best outdoor experiences of my life. Despite the necessity of packing efficiently when backpack camping, I decided to bring my camera and podcast gear, and I'm so glad I did. Greg and I decided to record a follow-up episode while out in the backcountry of Yellowstone. Mid-morning, sipping yerba mate by the fire, we asked each other some questions about our journeys in the last year since seeing each other. The conversation starts with me asking Greg about the impact of his new fishing guide position in the park. Greg is a wealth of knowledge and delivers intellectual gems about Yellowstone, park sustainability, fishing, and sharing your passion with others. We take a mini break and return with Greg asking me some pointed questions about my time in Europe and in Africa. This episode is treasured to me. Listening to it takes me back to the campsite, lakeside, sharing an adventure with one of my best friends. In the show notes, I've attached a link to some photography shot during our trip. Be sure to check it out. Go back and listen to Greg's first interview and enjoy this Fireside chat episode of the Mindmill Podcast. Well, Greg, welcome back to, I think this may be the first outdoor campsite. What am I saying? This is absolutely the first campsite fireside chat that we've ever done on the Mindmill. And I'm glad to have you back, man.
Oh, yeah, man. It's nice to be here.
We are in Greg's stomping grounds. We're in Yellowstone Park, Grebe Lake, campsite
4G2.
All right, check it out. Look it up on Google Maps. That's where we are at the moment. We got the fire behind us, so if you hear the crackling, that's what's up. We may be taking a couple tea breaks, but this is going to be kind of a cool round too. We're going to do some follow-up from the last episode. We're going to talk about where we are in each other's lives and just see where it takes us. Go a little more casual this time around.
Yeah, we've already caught up for a couple of days, but there's still plenty to talk about. So
we seem to hit the ground running when we meet because it's fewer and farther between than it used to be. So,
yeah, you've traveled the world,
and you seem to just keep going. You're just a constant traveler.
Full steam ahead.
Maybe not as far out as me, but you're always moving.
Yeah,
and I always respect that. Greg said I've been eager to have us on the podcast because we just keep talking. We just keep telling each other interesting things that's going on. I'm like, this is the type of shit that I wish we were recording, man. But I'd much rather do a fireside chat than driving down the highway at 11:30 at night.
Yeah, especially when you're driving through the park, watching for bison and elk jumping out on the road.
So what we did this time is we decided to separate and write down a couple of questions that we hadn't asked each other yet, or maybe some follow-ups on stuff that we wanted to know more about in the last 6 months, or just that we haven't touched on the show yet. And we were going to just kind of bounce it back and forth and see where it goes.
Sweet.
You told me earlier that this is your 10th year in Yellowstone, or it's been a decade since you started. I don't know if you've been in every year.
2009 was the first year, so I guess technically next year will be the 10-year anniversary of since I've been coming to Yellowstone. I hadn't been in Yellowstone the whole time. I spent the 2.5 years in Colorado, but mostly kind of bouncing back and forth between Colorado, Yellowstone, and 2 seasons, or 2 summers rather, back home in Alabama.
So my question to you is, what made this season at Yellowstone so special?
Oh, man, that's a good one. I anticipated to have a really good summer just because when I knew that I was doing the fishing guide job, I obviously was super excited about it. But I think just doing a season outside of Old Faithful was something that I needed just to experience another part of the park as an employee. I'd visited Lake before, visited Canyon and a lot of the other major destinations in the park, done many hikes there, and just kind of wanted to experience a different employee culture. Still the same vibe, just a different part of the park. So I think a lot of the new friends were a big part of me having a good summer as well. And just kind of being out on the lake is something special. There's a specific gravity that the lake has that you can't really describe, but it's beautiful being out there.
Yeah, I intentionally set myself up to be staring out at the water while we're having this conversation for that exact reason, man. It is magical, man. We're not looking at Yellowstone Lake, but we're looking at a different one that's fantastic. We saw these swan last night. We've been hearing elk, and luckily haven't seen any bears yet, but we are in the heart of the country. We got our bear mace within arm's distance.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, anyway, you were mentioning to me that you're at this point now with Yellowstone where you've been here long enough that you know your way around, you kind of know the ins and outs of how the park employment works, but there's this crucial spontaneity or this crucial diversity that you need to keep coming at the park with in order to keep it from dragging you down. You had showed me something like, oh, this is how like kind of the new employees act, and this is how people kind of in your sweet spot act, and then there's the people who have been here way too long. So what's your recommendation? I mean, obviously you've got your Yellowstone experience, but when it comes to having almost a decade in one area off and on, how do you keep it fresh?
I think probably different people have different schools of thought and different approaches to that issue. Maybe some people diversify their job and move around jobs kind of like I have. And then maybe some people diversify their recreation. And I've kind of done a little bit of both. I've moved around jobs, and I did a whole lot of hiking when I first got here. Now I do a whole lot of fishing and kind of exploring and noticing that there's a lot of biking in the park. And just to experience the same things in different ways is kind of a way for it to bring more value to me as far as what Yellowstone has already brought me, and to be able to do the same thing but in a different way is kind of nice. But I think a lot of people go deeper down the path of what they're involved in, whether that's something with the concessions or something with NPS, and they
What's
really
NPS?
do
Just
National Park Service. Right. Yeah. So the Park Service employees that they're facilitating law enforcement as well as public facilities and groundskeeping in some places, and everything from general maintenance on the road systems. A lot of stuff gets contracted out, but they take care of a lot of it themselves. And I think that's a good path to go down if you want to have a career in the Park Service and still be able to move around, but have a passion for a specific park. I think EMS is another kind of deep road you can go down in the park and really get involved with.
Medical, yeah.
Yeah, the emergencies that happen have to be maintained.
You can't really do that 1 year and then out, I imagine. It's such a deep
Yeah, you could probably volunteer.
career.
You could volunteer if you wanted to. But once you invested time into either becoming a paramedic or even just an EMT, it makes you want to do it more than just one season. But I think as you kind of go down those different routes, you get more fulfillment out of being here. You get more involved in what's going on. You see the change that maybe you could help facilitate, or maybe just see like a really cool group of people doing really cool stuff for other people that maybe want to be a part of that group, or just kind of get inspired by this person or that person just by their personality, not even what they're doing. Sometimes I've made decisions on jobs just because I wanted to work with a specific person.
Absolutely, man. I've done the same. Because above all else, it's not exactly the job you're doing. It's the unified vision and the team of people that share that vision, right? And especially when you're here, this is my first time in Yellowstone, but damn, man, just I'm looking around, I'm hard-pressed to find something that looks shitty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even the worst job here is still surrounded by the most beautiful nature, the most preserved nature, too. Last night, we ate a trout. You want to tell us about that trout? Because I can't do it justice.
Okay, so there's 2 species in Yellowstone Lake, and catch and release species is the native species. That's the Yellowstone cutthroat trout. So obviously we weren't eating the native species, but the other one that's an invasive species, the lake trout, delicious fish, but it just isn't supposed to be in this ecosystem. It's detrimental to the wildlife. I think there's a list of 40 species in the park that are affected by the cutthroat trout or kind of depend on it in one way or another. And we were eating a lake trout. So as we catch fish, either for our clients or on our own time, we can freeze the lake trout and bring it out and cook it in the backcountry in the middle of all these bears. I promise it's safe.
Well, we haven't seen anything yet, but we've only been out here for about 24 hours. Now, you were saying it was like fresh caught in a lake that had never seen any toxic waste at any time in its entire existence.
We've definitely gone to a lot of measures to keep the greater Yellowstone ecosystem as pure as possible. And maybe we've made some mistakes as far as introducing fish here with certain fish. You're never going to find a Park Service employee to admit that we introduced lake trout into Yellowstone Lake because nobody really knows. It could have been some pissed off anglers that introduced them. It could have been when we were suppressing the fires from 1988, we pulled water out of Lewis Lake, which we had intentionally stocked with lake trout. And we could have scooped up some eggs or even a fish and dropped it in the lake when we were suppressing the fires around the lake.
That was my question, is how do you introduce a species? Is it as easy as just one fish, one batch of eggs, or do you got to release a small sample?
I think you got to release more than one, but to be honest, I'm not a biologist. I don't really know. I think the chances of some anglers distributing a few at one time, it would probably be enough to start a whole
invasion.
No, like the number of fish that are out there. Yeah, I think that they're kind of starting to see a trend for the better as far as getting the lake trout out, but I don't think they'll ever get them all out.
How can you, man? This place is so vast, and how can you identify that for sure they're all out? You going to do sonar or what?
They have some radio tracked, so they can kind of see where they frequent, and they can gill net and get as many as they can. The gill nets are set deep enough to where hopefully they don't get too many cutthroat, and they get just the lake trout in the net. But, of course, they get a few cutthroats in the net, too. But they try to keep it a pretty high ratio of lake trout versus the cutthroats. And I think they've got other ways of telling how many fish are in the lake in general, whether that's cutthroats or lake trout. They've got suppression netting where they just kind of randomly pick places and net those places just to see what the ratios are and how we're doing.
Sure. So I've known you for quite a while, man, and I knew you were from the South. I knew you were way into jiu-jitsu and yoga and teaching children. But coming out here and seeing you at the tail end of this first season, you fishing, being a fishing guide, you are obsessed. I don't think I've ever seen a happier Greg than last night. I had a spinning rod, and I was very dry, safe out by the on the shore, and Greg was wading about shin deep in the leech-infested water, fly fishing.
I don't think I got a leech on me.
I don't know, man. There's some pretty gnarly feet right there. But I just want to know, has this extreme obsession with fishing, has it intensified this year, or has it just kind of been reawoken?
I'm not even sure myself.
I've never heard you talk so much about it, but I've never been in Yellowstone with you.
Yeah, I think I definitely went through spells where I didn't fish at all, probably for a year. But I've been fishing since I was 3. My stepdad took me fishing pretty much when he started dating my mother, and I think I was around 3 when they got married. So as far as I can remember, I've been fishing my whole life. And I think this season, it was just like this interesting compilation between experience from the past with something that I'm actually passionate about, because I had a lot of boating experience going out to Smith Lake in Alabama with my dad growing up, and my dad and stepmom and stepbrother. We had a houseboat. It was like this cool houseboat that just stayed in one spot, but we had different boats that we would get out there on. We had like a runabout boat and some bass boat. The bass boat was with my stepdad, and then we had a pontoon now. So there's just a lot of boating experience that, coupled with the fishing experience from my stepdad and kind of the family dynamic experience from teaching martial arts, definitely helps when you take a family out on a boat and the kids are being kids, and you're able to understand that instead of kind of lose your mind because kids are about to climb over the side of the boat and fall into 40-degree water.
Topple right in.
Yeah, but I think it was a mixture of being passionate about it in the present moment. And also there's this really big learning opportunity to learn how to fish for a different fish than I would have in Alabama. Trout fishing out here is not significantly different with casting, but as far as down rigging for lake trout that are super deep, and then fly fishing is something completely new. So
You just started this year, fly fishing?
I've been fly fishing a little bit since I've been working out here, but I definitely have taken it more seriously this season. And I've never used what we call downriggers to shoot the lures really deep in the water where you're marking fish. You can use a cable that's got a weight on it, and you clip your line into that and you drop it to a specific depth, ideally the depth that the fish are. And it just gets your lure deeper than it would be able to if you just drove the boat with a flat line off the back.
The goal is to put the enticing lure near where they normally habitat.
Right, and they're just a lot deeper than a cutthroat would be. I mean, we do catch cutthroats off the downrigger, but the lake trout are just a deep dwelling fish. And as the summer progresses, the water heats up and they go deeper. And we're always looking for this thing called the thermocline, which is somewhere between like 37 degrees and maybe like 41 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's where the lake trout tend to be. And so we're always looking for that temperature. And when we find that temperature, ideally the fish are at that temperature throughout the lake. So it's kind of like a job to find the depth that everybody's fishing at and then find specifically where they're at.
Sure.
But, yeah, man, I could talk forever about
I know,
fishing.
man. I know my goal right now that I'm asking some questions, is to be like, all right, just keep backing it up a bit, because I am a dumbass when it comes to fishing. I can hardly get that thing into the water.
Man.
And last night he's like, just give me a quick tutorial on how to cast. And he throws it in there and immediately catches a fish. I spent the next hour and 15 minutes trying to recreate that moment and didn't catch anything. But I'm hopeful for today. I'm looking out.
We're going to get you on a fish, bud. Don't you worry.
I got it, man. I'm confident. So on that subject, I imagine that most people that come out here and take your fishing tour, your fishing experience, they're either complete novice or somewhere between beginner and intermediate. I would imagine that expert fishers probably go off for something a little bit more remote, a little bit more advanced, maybe getting out to some place like we are right now or to a river. How do you grab newcomers? How do you instill the passion for fishing? You kind of got me a couple times. I want to bring it out on the air right now.
I think the people that are going out are interested in the experience of feeling this animal tugging on the line, right? But it is pretty awesome to take like this 7-year-old kid that's never caught a fish before in his life and just somehow or another mom or dad found out that was one of the activities, maybe when they were booking their trip and staying in the hotel, and they might have just nonchalantly pitched the idea to their kid, and then their kid gets really excited, has no idea what he's going to experience, but is already excited about it. When you actually get that kid on a fish, it's pretty awesome. And
probably about the purest expression you'll see.
Everybody's excited about having a fish on the line. And sometimes, it's slower than others, but when the fish are there, I think it just puts people in that flow state that we would call it, but really just in the moment, where they're not thinking about their dinner reservations or the fact that they got a flat tire on the way here or the bison jam that they just sat in for 2 hours. All that's really on their mind in the moment is that fish, and hoping that we get it in the net before it gets off the hook.
We talk about that a lot between yoga and jiu-jitsu and pretty much anything in life. Flow state is just so crucial, and it's beautiful to see that you can facilitate that for people, young, old, male, female, doesn't matter. People can respect that feeling of a one-track mind. It's like, I just want to catch me an animal right now. It's not about eating them, but it's about just the victory.
Yeah, and it's cool that you could
experience. Theoretically,
if you were starving to death and you caught a fish, you would no longer be starving to death.
We chatted about that last night when we were cooking up the trout. We were like, this is about as primal as it gets, man. Taking the bones out, putting it over a fire, eating something you caught.
It's definitely a rewarding experience to take something out of the lake, especially as pure as it is. And I mean, we're at 7,700 feet on Yellowstone Lake. It's 135 square miles, which is like little less than Lake Tahoe, but it's much higher, over 1,000 feet higher. The river that flows in and out of it, the Yellowstone River, is an undammed river. Like, it's the longest undammed river in the country. So it's just really cool to pull something out of this lake. Even though it's not a native species, it's still an awesome experience to pull something out of the lake and get to share it with your friends. Clients on the boat can take their catch to the kitchens if they want to take it to the Yellowstone Lake Hotel. They can cook it there. Or
will they clean it there?
I'll clean it, and then we fillet it up for them, put it on ice, and then they take it to the kitchen, and they make a nice silver platter for the guest. And I mean, millions of guests come into the park every season. Very few of them are having that experience. And it's cool, something unique, and in my opinion, one of the coolest things you can do in the park. You can ride a stagecoach out in the middle of a valley in the Roosevelt area and have a little cookout. That's another cool experience. But even somebody that wasn't biased would put it in like the top 3 experiences you can have. It's just cool to experience that, pulling something out of the national park and harvesting it, if you will. I mean, I'm surprised they let us fish. they don't let us hunt. So
I think it's because of that invasive species.
that could be
Because
possible.
they are
but
very, very strict about it.
Yeah,
about
but-
what you can bring in and what you have to throw
Right.
back.
we were fishing before the lake trout were in. So I think it might be just part of the tradition of the park. You see black and white pictures of people fishing here, and people want to be able to have those same experiences. That's why we have the horse-drawn carriage, because
Yeah.
part of it is being able to step back in time since the land really hasn't changed at all and have a similar experience that people traveling 100 years ago had. So.
It's amazing, man. There's
Yeah, it's
definitely
cool.
an energy to Yellowstone. It's, I've been lucky to have lived in Colorado for almost a decade now. I do feel a bit jaded, a bit spoiled. I can kind of compare Yellowstone to Rocky Mountain National Forest or to Moab or to other places I've been. There's like a majesty to Yellowstone here and
Yeah.
how preserved it is, and what'd you call them, bison jams?
Yeah,
You
bison
know,
jams.
like the complete opposite of a traffic jam. Everyone's waiting around for the bison just to clear the road.
Yeah, and
So-
people complain about it, but I kind of like it.
Yeah,
It
man,
makes everybody slow down. For
You're
a
in a
second.
national park. You come here for the undisturbed nature, and when nature disturbs you a little bit, you start
And worst case
griping.
scenario, somebody's missing their dinner reservation or maybe a flight. That
That could be an issue. I can see that.
or a medical issue. And
But what are
there's
you
a
gonna
bison
What are you gonna do
jam,
about
but-
it? You gonna go get a chopper and pull the bison out of the way?
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty much they do what they want and you deal with it.
So you said everybody comes here for different reasons. There's a million visitors a year, but you are biased and you're also experienced. What would you say your top 3 experiences in Yellowstone? First timer coming in, just completely open mind, like myself.
Okay.
I came in here, like, I love hiking. I'm happy to be on a horse. I'd love to see thermal features, go fishing, whatever. What would you say the top 3?
I would say outside of seeing all the sites, like the canyon, which we'll look at tomorrow morning, and seeing Old Faithful, outside of the major destinations, and I would consider Prismatic even one of those major destinations. But
that one blew me away.
yeah, that's
I really, really enjoyed Grand Prismatic.
one of my favorites. I would say the 2 of the activities, all the activities actually, but going out on a horse is cool. Even though you're in a line, the horses are very tame and trained to pretty much follow like nose to tail. So you can't like roam around in the meadow on your horse, but it's still nice to not have to look at your feet where you're stepping in and just sit on the horse and look around at Yellowstone and get a different perspective. So the horse tours and maybe even the stagecoach, you can put that all in one.
Sure.
Going out that afternoon on a stagecoach and they take you out and there's a big bonfire and usually there's an employee that plays music. They'll have a little bit of entertainment and a nice steak dinner on a tin plate in the middle of the backcountry, and you just got to sit on a stagecoach to get there.
It's kind of like what we're doing right now, but
Yeah.
at a horse and carriage.
Yeah,
That's
it's
cool.
It's cool.
Yeah, that does sound cool.
And then the fishing tours, obviously. I just think that that's the only way to see certain parts of the lake, regardless of whether or not you catch fish. There's only one way to see certain parts of Yellowstone, and that's by getting out on the Yellowstone Lake.
Sure. And being on the water, you just have such a diverse and great opportunity to see different type of wildlife because everything comes to the water at some point. The birds are way more active by the water, obviously the fish,
Yeah.
and you can see bison or bear, elk coming up to the water.
I've seen a couple bears. I've only seen one from the water. I've seen a bunch of elk, a really nice bull elk, lots of bald eagles. But the bear that I saw was swimming across the bay, and we watched it swim all the way across. And when it got up on the shore, it had a back leg that it wouldn't touch. So it was only walking on 3 legs. And I think the only logical thing is that maybe it got hit by a car. Because I've seen bears be injured before from like maybe a big grizzly fighting another big grizzly, but they can still touch their foot down.
What about some sort of, I know bears are obviously, they're out here all the time, but at some point you could lose your footing and maybe sprain your ankle or whatever.
It was probably like a 2-year-old cinnamon bear, which is what we call a black bear that's brown, which kind of causes some confusion. But
Sure.
sometimes black bears aren't black; they're brown, and they're not grizzlies. So
A
we call
cinnamon
them,
bear sounds like the most delicious thing of all time.
we call them
I feel like I want to
cinnamon
hug it
bears.
and maybe like eat it with some graham crackers.
But yeah, it was a younger bear, so it's possible it could have hurt itself walking across some of the logs. But it was close to the road, and the bay that it was crossing, I think logistically it swam because it didn't want to walk, and it came from a place with a road, and it was going to a place with a road, so maybe it was trying to avoid the road. But I don't know. It was just cool to see it, and then see it get up off on shore, and then just be curious about why it was limping. But all you can do is tell Park Service, and I'm sure an injured bear could cause some issues. So I just told Park Service, and hopefully it didn't get harassed too much. And
Was that this season?
Yeah, that was this season. I had a family on my boat. I just was taking the boat up on plane and saw something that I thought was a log, but it kind of had the, when a duck's going through water, it creates that V, that small little bitty wake. And the log was creating that V. And I was like, that log can't be moving that fast. And then as I got closer to it, I was like, that's a bear. That's cool.
I have mixed feelings as to whether or not I want to see a bear. You come to Yellowstone, you're like, yeah, I want to see a bear, but not necessarily where we are right now with fresh cooked fish smell all around us and bear bag. We'll see. We'll see how it works out, man.
Never had a problem with one, and all the times that I've encountered them, I've never had to spray my bear spray. And I think they want to avoid us as much as we want to avoid bad encounters with them.
Sure.
But there's just sometimes the wind's in your face, and they can't smell you coming, and you've been walking next to a river, and they can't hear you walking up, and the trail might bend or might have some rolling hills, so they can't see you walking up. And
it's more about startling the bear than it is them just coming up to your campsite to say hi or something.
Or walking up on one with a carcass. And
that's why the bear bags are so important, is because they'll just come following the smell. And then you'll be startled by them being there, and then it'll cause a situation.
Yeah, and our tent's 100 yards away, and our food is
hanging up fire is
25 feet or so.
Yeah.
So it knows that there's humans here, and it knows that we have food, but ideally the bears don't associate humans with a food source because they know they can't get to our food because we're doing everything we can to keep them from it, and that's just good bear management.
Ideally. Well, man, the fire's getting low. I think our water's hot. Let's take a little breather, especially because I've been grilling you this whole time, too.
Oh, yeah. I got some questions for you, Seth.
So let's take a quick breather. We'll be right back.
All right.
We're back. That was a good break. We got hydrated. We got our mate.
Oh, yeah.
Stoked the fire. All right, Greg, what do you got for me, man?
I got a couple of simple questions. What was your favorite meal out of all your places you went?
Did you just lob them up as like I have a couple stupid questions?
No, that's simple questions.
Oh, okay. I was like, man, don't sell yourself short.
No, just to break the ice. Yeah.
I was going to say, it's pretty awkward between us. Sure. My favorite meal. So you're talking about the travels?
Yeah.
Throughout all of the 5 months?
Yeah.
All right. That's a tricky one. It's hard to place that on a number one.
I guess if you had to do 2 or 3, you can do 2 or 3. But if you had to have one experience again.
Sure. The trip to the Sahara Desert was really special for a lot of reasons. We were talking about it on the hike in. Just the differences of riding a horse versus riding a camel, being in the Sahara Desert, reliving my dreams to be Aladdin, and just experiencing the Berber community, the nomadic people in the Sahara. So when I think of most memorable meals, maybe not the most tasty, but the most memorable, it was the tagine, which is the local Moroccan dish that they made us a tagine, a really large one for the entire group that we all kind of scooped some with bread, and it was very family style. And we ate it with the Berbers and our guides, and we were in a tent in the middle of the Sahara. There was actually a sandstorm going on. That was a memorable moment. That was a cool experience for sure. Paris was great. Paris is known for its food. I tried the escargot, the pâté, the confit, the baguettes, the croissants, the fromageries, the patisseries, and the boulangeries. Paris was just a big old food fest. I'm trying to think. Some of my favorite meals were in the beginning when I was in Spain, and I've grown to learn that I'm not a fan of traditional tapas simply because when you're in Spain, especially in the south of Spain, that's pretty much the majority of what they eat. So it's just kind of getting sick of anything. But eating, once again, kind of like last night, eating fresh fish, especially the el pulpo, the octopus on the tapas, was a wonderful experience too. And getting to see my family for the first time in a few months and spending time with them, that was also a really memorable experience. But man, I don't think I could put one meal on it. I didn't really do too much fine dining out there. When you're out there traveling for that long, you don't really justify a meal that's above $20. You know what I mean?
Well, that's definitely one of the things that when I look forward to traveling and kind of hear about other people traveling, I'm like, what was the food like?
Yeah.
I feel like it's a normal thing to want to know what another culture's doing as far as how they harvest food and how they have been making food for hundreds or sometimes thousands of years. So a little jealous of the food you got to eat.
Thanks, brother.
So what was the most meaningful experience? Then that might have been one of your meals.
Sure.
But that was the next question.
Most meaningful?
Yeah, most meaningful experience as far as like when you anticipated this trip, maybe you thought in your mind, oh, I'd like to feel like this or like this, and just obviously the human spirit is just fueled by new experiences in general. But when you planned it out and you thought it through, maybe you anticipated one thing being more life-changing than another, but after it's all said and done, now you're back. What do you feel like? What kind of perspective or what kind of place gave you a perspective that you weren't necessarily anticipating?
Sure. It's a good question. I'm trying to trace my memory back to when we did the travel recap episode when I was talking about this sort of thing. But I think the most memorable are the ones that are a bit surprising. That's what you're kind of getting at, is you go in there with expectations, but it's never exactly the same.
Right.
So what was the one that was the most kind of shocking in
there we go. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Memorable way.
Yeah.
So I know I touched on this, but the clubs in Berlin, without a doubt, that was the most transformative moment of the trip. There were a lot of great experiences. In Morocco, I know I talked about the spontaneous hike up with the local Moroccan up in Chefchaouen to look down on the Blue City during during the prayers. That was amazing. But those are the types of things where, like, I'm in Morocco. I know I'm going to a mountainous city. I'm going to take photos. That was something that kind of was a bit expected. It surpassed my expectations, but I do not like the club scene. You know me, man. That's not my scene. I'm not like, what are you doing on Saturday? And
let's go clubbing.
Because I'm going to the club. It's just never been my thing. But that experience, I think above all else, just the no cell phone policy at these clubs just changed everything. It shifted it from being a kind of, in America, it feels like it doesn't exist unless you can document it. It's like, this was a great experience, but it's only as good as the best video or photo I can get of the experience. That coupled with the kind of in-your-face music of the clubs, in most American clubs, of the very high-end, huge builds, big drops, overpowered. And then I think there's also a competitive level to it. There's a kind of a sexy culture and a more protective, you don't want to dance with some other guy's girl or vice versa. There's this kind of edge to American club scene. And Berlin, it just did not seem to exist. It was just this giant community of people there for the music and the good times. And I know that there were couples there. I know that there were a lot of drugs there. I saw a lot of them around me. But the general energy in these places was so pure. It reminded me of why this is a scene to begin with and why Berlin has that lore. So I find myself now a little bit more occasionally, I see those trumpeter swans out in the lake. They're real close again. I listen to it less than I used to. When I first got back, man, when I would put on my work music, I was finding like Berlin house to listen to, just kind of some down tempo, low energy. It's kind of like a 10-minute swell of four on the floor with cool textures. So that really did change me, because I was so sworn off of electronic music. I thought, like, I liked a few artists here and there, but that was not my genre. And Berlin changed that.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. My buddy Gary that you've met, he's been off in Germany, and he's been teaching some Budokan classes. And
what's Budokan?
It's a blend of calisthenics, yoga, and martial arts.
Okay.
I hope I'm saying that right. It might not be calisthenics, it might be gymnastics, but like aerobic type stuff, like high energy workouts. But the foundation seems to be on yoga and martial arts. And it's from Miami. So he met a girl in Miami, and he was following her around when she went back to Europe. But yeah, he raved about Berlin, and it's just like one of those places that you see people here in Yellowstone from Germany a lot, and their language is a little bit easier to place. And so you're like, I know about Munich and I know about Berlin, but I've never been there. Where are you from? And you hear different stories, and it's another one that's on the list for sure. Check out Germany.
It seems like the German population, during the break, we realized that the word Greg was searching for was population. Yeah. It seems like the German population is there's kind of a spectrum of the German population where Berlin is incredibly transient. It has such a tough history that it seems to be a city that's kind of evolved in 20th and 21st century, as opposed to some of the older cities in Europe that have a longer, more untouched history, more preserved.
Yeah.
The German people also have a very gracious vacation schedule, and that's why the Germans love to travel so much. I've met Germans all over the world. It seems to be like you meet somebody and you ask them where they're from, there's like a 40% chance they're going to be from Germany. It's because they have such a good vacation time with their jobs. So
I didn't know that either.
So that makes them a very well-traveled people. And then there's also, from what I've noticed, a very kind of quiet, reserved version of the German people that are normally from some of the smaller towns, not necessarily your Munichs, your Frankfurts, your Berlins, but some of the smaller areas. And they travel as well, but they seem to be a little bit more traveling in groups. Either way, I was floored by the German people. It's a great place to spend a good amount of time when you go to Europe, Greg. I don't know when that'll be.
Oh, goodness. Who knows? It could be next week. It would be nice if it was next week. All right. So what's next for the Wanderlust? I know you've been all over the place for like the past year pretty much. Is it stuff closer to home, like North America, checking out parts of Mexico or Canada?
Sure.
I know we've talked about spots that we would like to travel here in the States. But when you're looking at that bucket list, is it places that I'm sure there's places you would like to revisit, or is there something, a brand new experience that you hadn't had yet?
That question shifts from day to day.
I want to hear New Zealand. That's what I want to hear.
New Zealand has been on the list for quite a while. Hey, how's that mate coming?
It's ready.
That looks a little oversteeped there, friend.
I forgot it, dude. I forgot we were brewing tea in the middle of the podcast. Don't tell Ranger Bob I threw that tea bag in the fire.
You just told Ranger Bob you threw that tea bag.
He's not going to listen to this.
You said it right into the microphone.
I'm going to send it to him just so he knows.
All right.
Ranger
the question
Bob.
is where is the travel mind taking me?
Yes, sir.
Honestly, right now, I am just so excited to be back in Colorado. I say, as I say that, as I'm not in Colorado, but coming back after 5 months traveling, it's been a whirlwind of a summer, getting my feet back on the ground, getting this podcast more gussied up and more shows out and marketing it better. It's been really energizing to have my home again, to have my kitchen, to have my bathroom, to have my office.
Totally
and
get it.
The actions that kind of inspire having your own place to nest. So right now, I am taking a firm stance on a travel hold for right now. I'll probably go see my family in the holidays, but damn, man, I'm kind of burnt out right now. I know that'll change.
Yeah.
But
and then I'll be ready to go traveling.
I know I'll get a call and you'll be like, I'm off contract. It's time for me to get out there again. It'll happen, Greg. I think, man, there's so many places. The constant struggle of travel is that as you're crossing places off the list, you just add 3 more for every one you cross off. Like leaving Europe, I was like, well, now I have to go to Greece. I have to go to Croatia. I want to go to Serbia. I want to go see Poland. There's so many places that were never on my list beforehand, but after being in that area, I'm like, damn, those ones slipped right through my fingers. There'll never be a point where I'm like, okay, I'm content with traveling, but there'll absolutely be chapters in my life where I feel the need to stay in one place for a while and cultivate my life a bit more. That's really what I'm excited for. This wilderness trip with you is fantastic, and I love it. And it's giving me a lot of chance to reflect and talk things out with you, both off and on air. But when I get back, it's time to get into my zone a bit more. That being said, I think going back to South America is up on the list. And the reason I say that is I've been practicing my Spanish for over a year now in preparation for Europe. I fell in love with the practice and gaining more and more knowledge of the language. Meeting new friends through Spanish has been amazing. I fell in love with the people of Argentina. They're just so damn vibrant and friendly, and I'm drinking mate right now just thinking about it. But I think South America, I think maybe Colombia, Argentina, maybe a trip back to Peru might be on the list, but I don't know when that's going to be, my friend.
Right on. I get it. Can relate to the desire to have stability when the time is right. And I'm looking to kind of find something maybe out here in Montana like that, potentially back in Colorado like that, but definitely discovered through last summer that I want to be out here. I spent last summer in Alabama, and it was a perfect summer to be back home for so many different reasons, but the main thing that I kind of was able to remind myself of is that it's not just like a fling being in a place that you love that enables you to travel and see other places that you haven't experienced yet. And that's, for me, what this place is kind of giving me. So it's easy to kind of stay here because I love being here, but it also helps me experience other places. So
yeah,
I get it, man. We'll get back out. The next podcast maybe is going to be maybe Denver or New Mexico. One of those
New Mexico?
New Mexico would be great.
I love it. I love it. We could definitely make it down to Taos, maybe Sedona. I don't know. We're in that stage right now. We're out here with nothing to do.
As long as neither one of us falls too deeply in love.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always on the horizon, right?
Yeah.
Everything
diverts.
shifts. But hey, you know what? Maybe it'll work out where we both fall in love and then we just do this epic trip.
Maybe they're sisters.
Maybe they're sisters.
You can edit that
I will not edit that out.
Oh,
That one's staying in.
Well, all right, last question for you.
All right.
I don't even have to look at the phone. I know what this one is.
All right, give it to me.
So what about Yellowstone is the most appealing so far? To give you a couple examples, it could be the scenery or just the wildness in general or the people or the activities, anything.
I think the easy answer is obviously the scenery. It's a national park. People come here from all over the world to see it, and it doesn't disappoint. It's more vast than anybody could see in a 4-day trip or 4 years of living here year round.
Yeah.
It's nature, and it's never ending, and it's a beautiful thing. But I think what I've really enjoyed is the people you've introduced me to. They've just been so genuinely happy. And to even go a little bit further, just the community here in Yellowstone is very much like, what can I do for you? How can I scratch your back? And I think that it's less about how can I get my back scratched, but that just kind of happens by diffusion.
Exactly.
Everybody has this disease of sharing. Everybody's contracted it when they come here. And it's like, well, somebody needs a tent. I got a tent. Someone needs a fly rod. I got a fly rod. It's a very sharing community, and it helps kind of bolster those relationships of already working together, already having common goals, but also knowing that your coworkers are people you may have at your wedding one day. They're people who will come out and literally save your ass in the middle of the trailhead if something goes wrong. That's something that's very strong and something that you kind of lose when you're out and you're in the city, and it's just so big and there's so many different communities that you start feeling almost isolated in a sea of people, right?
Yeah.
And that I felt very welcomed since I've been here. I've also got a really awesome glimpse of seeing the front end of the park, seeing the Old Faithful, seeing the infinite gift shops, as well as the back end, the employee dining room and the offices and how the inner workings, how it all happens, you know, how Yellowstone remains as pure and as unadulterated as it's been.
Yeah, it's a big operation.
But shit, man, if I see a bear, we'll get back on the air and I'll change my answer to that's the highlight. I saw a fucking bear.
Oh, man. Hey, let me get that cup.
You want some mate?
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Absolutely, man. You got anything else for me?
No, man, that was a good answer. I just kind of wanted people to, and I knew you could see it. That's why I wanted to ask you, is that just, it's not just a place, and it is. It's beautiful. It doesn't disappoint. And in my opinion, it's not, sometimes it might not have that Yosemite gleam, or it might not have that, it's got those picturesque places, but
There's
look
a
around.
bald eagle flying above us right as we say that.
Oh, what up, bald eagle?
Oh, man, you can't plan that sort of thing.
That's awesome. Good spot.
That's awesome. I can't spot many birds, but when there's a giant bird with a white head, I'm going to take a stab and say that's a bald eagle.
Yeah, no, you got it.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I was just going to say how raw it is. And we can see a peak that might be 1.5 miles away, and we can see the lake that's 300 yards away, but everything else is just raw, dead trees, and maybe trees that are now 30 years old from the 88 fires. But it's amazing to kind of be in a place that's so raw, but also the people here is what brings you back. You know that you're taken care of, and like you said, if somebody needs a tent, there's a tent or a fly rod or whatever. But even in our jobs, when employees come to get on the boat, they're treated just like any other paying employee. Or if I went and rode horses, I'm treated just like any other paying employee. And it's just nice that we can kind of take care of each other because we're facilitating experiences. And
Right.
It's not just a place to get away, but if you need that, it's there. And it's not just a place to just hike around, even though that's obviously what a lot of us are doing.
Sure.
It's definitely a place to come get a completely separate experience than you would as a guest.
Yeah.
And I'm always thankful for the guest, but sometimes, especially here in this park and probably some other big ones like Yosemite, sometimes the guest numbers do get to you, and it's nice to kind of have other people to relate to. And sometimes those other people are having a separate experience than you are. Like, I'm only taking out a single family, and it's very easy to manage a single family. But even on the snow coaches, when I was driving snow coaches, I had multiple families on one snow coach. It could be a family from China next to a family from Texas.
Yep.
And I think that's a beautiful thing, and 9 times out of 10 it is. But every now and then, cultural dynamics happen, and it's unfortunate but kind of fortunate at the same time. Like, it's part of experiencing Yellowstone at this point.
It's got its legacy, man. Everybody wants to come here and see what it's all about. Speaking of which, man, it is getting hot. The sun is up, the fire is down, and we've got adventures to
Yeah, let's go either fish or climb a peak. Wanted to.
All right. I've been looking at this lake for the entirety of this interview. Well, this wasn't even an interview. This was a conversation.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. I need to do more of these, man. Just more open.
Yeah.
I don't want to be grilling you the whole time, man.
No, it's all good, man. I like the questions because they make you think about things that might not have been thinking about.
We're good at that, man. We're good at getting into some deep subjects. I'm glad we kind of touched on it, and I'm really glad it was worth bringing this bulky microphone recorder out here. We actually got on the air a bit. That was huge, man. I feel like we got something cool done today.
Yeah, brother.
And now we're about to get a bunch of other cool things done. Let's go catch some fish.
Yes, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the Mindful Millennial Podcast. If you loved this episode, check out some of the other Mindmill episodes. They're all free and available at themindmill.com and on all the major podcast platforms. Also, please take a second and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's incredibly easy, and it really is the best way to help the show. Stay tuned for more Mindmill episodes coming down the line. I'll keep them interesting for you, I promise. Take it easy.